Hey guys, so in today's video, I'm going to be going over preacher curl and how to get the most out of our preacher curls. I'm going to also be talking about what's the difference between a regular biceps curl and the preacher curl. And I'm going to be using my bench today. I'm in my home gym. I'm going to walk you through it all, just kind of using a bench, because even if you're at the gym or if you're at home, you don't need an actual preacher. You can use a bench. It does the same exact thing. So I'm really excited. We're going to, one, review the difference between a regular biceps curl and a preacher curl as far as the resistance profile goes. Another thing that I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to be talking about internal stability and external stability, because the preacher bench can really help us out with some of that external stability. So let's get going here. So if we are looking at a regular biceps curl, okay, where is it the most difficult? Is it the most difficult down here? Nah. Most difficult up here? Nope. It's actually going to be most difficult right here when the biceps are in more of a mid position, right? So this is the biceps lengthened, this is the biceps shortened, and here we're overloading or working them more in more of that mid range. So in a regular biceps curl, that's where we are making it the most difficult, is in this position here. But let's just say you wanted to make it more difficult down here where the biceps are more lengthened, right? Because when I'm talking about lengthened, mid, short, I'm talking about the muscle tissue, okay? So think about me extending my arm down. This is really lengthening the biceps. And then as I contract, the biceps the muscles start coming together. Now it's in more of a mid position. Now, as like I get fully contracted up here, now the biceps are fully shortened and in a short contracted position. Okay, but obviously throughout the range of a biceps curl, we're not going like this and coming all the way up here, right? So we're just working within this range. So this is it lengthened, this is it mid, this is it more contracted as far as this range of motion goes here. So with a regular biceps curl with a dumbbell, it's going to be the most difficult right there, right? Well, what if I wanted to make it more difficult down here when the biceps are more lengthened, right? A lot of people have been talking about lengthened, working muscles in lengthened positions are actually producing a little bit more hypertrophy in some studies. So what if I wanted to, instead of just doing mid-range, what if I wanted to work it in lengthened? Or maybe you really want to have a biceps day and you want to overload it in that lengthened position, you want to overload it more in that mid position, then obviously mid would be a biceps curl, but how do I then load it in this position, right? Well, that's where the preacher bench can come in handy, because now the most difficult part of the exercise is right here where the biceps are more lengthened. Because remember, this is a more mid contraction, this is more lengthened. Now we're making this part down here more difficult with the preacher. So that's the difference between a preacher and just a regular biceps curl. Now, another reason why people like using the preacher is because it actually not just changes the resistance profile of an exercise, but it can add some external stability. So what do I mean by that? Well, we can all produce some type of stability, right? If I am doing a biceps curl, I can stabilize this arm pretty well and go through and do biceps curl, right? But as I push into fatigue, my arm may want to start rocking, I can no longer really keep it stable internally. So maybe that's when I grab a bench, put my arm, and I can now add some external stability to give me support. And I can now, because of this external stability, push further into fatigue. Kind of cool, right? Well, that's another thing that the bench at this angle is going to assist with too, is more of that external stability as we push further into fatigue. So not only does it change the resistance profile, but it also really keeps that upper arm right where we want it to be as we're really pushing closer towards failure, and it becomes really hard to have that internal stability, keeping that arm right where we want to. So it's an awesome opportunity for us to think about driving this arm, the back of this arm, against that pad as we really struggle at that sticky point where it's really hard, really struggle to keep going in that rep. Now we can think about pushing that underarm against this so that we can actually get more output. So it's awesome for that too. So now let me go over some tips for you as far as getting the most out of your preacher. These are a few mistakes that I see people do a lot with the preacher. One is, this isn't really a mistake, but let me just kind of walk you through this. You don't necessarily need to cup your entire underarm against that preacher. The only thing that we really need to do is make sure that we're keeping this arm as stable as possible. So you don't think that you need to kind of cup it down here. You can sit up a little bit more as long as you're finding stability right here, thinking about pushing the back of your arm against that bench and you're getting enough stability there, that's fine. You don't need to do this. Now, once again, that's not wrong. Whenever I say this, people are like, oh, I've been doing it wrong. You haven't been doing it wrong. It's just so you know, it's not about cupping this. It's just about providing stability to the arm. So don't think you have to get in weird positions to be able to do this. You can sit a little bit more upright if needed, as long as you're just getting that external stability. Another thing that I see people do is they use the bench, instead of flattening the arm against it this way, they use it as kind of this pivot, and then they just go back and forth like this. Or sometimes I'll see the shoulder go this way, go this way, go this way, go this way. And so once again, it's not really providing any stability because your shoulder's rocking, this arm, the whole thing is rocking, right? So it's kind of pointless to be using this if you're just going to be rocking either from this point or from the shoulder going back and forth. So let me explain something to you. This is something that I cover in great depth in my biomechanics course, where I go over the anatomy, I go over origin and insertion of all the muscles and what they do. But your biceps are going to be crossing the elbow, right? That's why it's an elbow flexor. But it also, biceps cross the shoulder. And so that's why sometimes people will actually get this movement at the shoulder. It's not like it just comes and attaches here, but it actually crosses the shoulder. So when people are cheating with biceps curls, you'll oftentimes see the shoulders rolling forward. And what the body is trying to do is it's trying to find a more advantageous position so that it can do more load with less work. Okay, so the body doesn't know that you're trying to build muscle. It doesn't know that you're trying to build strength. It just thinks, oh, she's trying to get a dumbbell from point A to point B. So if you get into a sticky spot, the body is like, oh, I know how to do this, right? Because we're just trying to get from point A to point B. So I'm going to drop my shoulder forward more, which in and of itself will slightly shorten the biceps. And then I'm going to rock this back, and now I got to point B. and it was far less tension on the muscle, far less difficulty as far as output, and I got from point A to point B. So that's why you see everybody cheat the exact same way. They go down, they get to this sticky point, they kind of shift forward, rock, back. Well, they do the same exact thing with the preacher, but the whole point of the preacher, besides, changing the resistance profile, is also to prevent that cheating. But you have to make sure you're still preventing that cheating. So don't be rolling your shoulder forward and rolling it back and rolling it forward. I see people do this all the time on the preacher. So you want to make sure that as it gets more difficult, instead of allowing the shoulder to roll forward, instead you think, no, I need to push the back of my arm back against the pad. So you get to a sticky part, instead of doing this, or instead of rolling like this, instead you think, push it back and then push through that sticky part or that really difficult part. So the whole point of the preacher is going to be adding this external stability to help you be able to increase your output. So make sure that you're using it to keep this arm here as stable as possible. So hopefully that helps you know the difference between a regular biceps curl and a preacher. Knowing also this helps you understand that if you are trying to work biceps one day, you could do both of those in the same session, because remember, they're both hitting the biceps at different muscle ranges. So one is working it in a little bit more of a lengthened position. One is overloading it a little bit more in that mid position. So honestly, those two in one day could be just perfect. That's all you need. Maybe somebody really wants to get in one more movement for biceps because they really want to be putting more volume towards them. Then what I would do is then I would finish it off with something working the biceps in a short position like this, which can be done bent over, and now it's more difficult in that contracted position. Or you could do pulleys, where you're doing more of this type of Hercules movement, where the pulley's coming from that direction. So 2 exercises, and if you really, really, really wanted to do a third because they really wanted to focus on biceps, then that is the third one that I would do for a biceps day. So hopefully this is helpful.